What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD interview. So real quick before we jump into this badass, amazing content, I want to give our sponsors a plug that make all this possible. So our first sponsor is www.perfectstormnow.com. Front-end lead generation, real estate specific lead generation software. It's a brilliant branding site, lead generation site. Not only do we provide you an epic, amazing site, we coach you for hours every single month, you guys. We have private mastermind groups where we walk you through and teach you how to be a lead generation machine. So it's not just a website, it's a coaching platform where we teach you how to become a lead generation and a lead conversion to client machine. Our second sponsor is my personal mentorship program, my 90-day mastery bootcamp, right? So recently with the 90-day mastery bootcamp, we have added our alumni program. It's a $50 a month program that you have daily access to me in our own private Facebook group, right? We have 2 monthly live sessions that are 2 hours long every single week. And again, you have daily access to me. We also have 2 live in-person events every 6 months. Every 6 months, we do a live event here in Phoenix Metro. They're 2 days long each event. We don't bring in speakers. There's nothing to sell. It's just hardcore masterminding, 20 hours of just hardcore badass content throughout those sessions. That's $50 a month. But in order to get into that program, you guys, you have to, the initiation fee, if you will, is the 90-day mastery bootcamp. We only want people in that program, real estate agents in that program, that know the process, that are going out there, that are getting results, know the process. So for the first time ever, we're allowing on our 90-day mastery bootcamp, splitting up into 3 payments. That program is $997. We're splitting up into 3 payments with no finance fee. So www.90daymastery.com. Promo code Live Mastery. There's only a few events left this year. If you have any questions about that event, shoot me an email, joshua@gsdmode.com. Also, make sure to jump into the private Facebook group. We just created a GSD Mode private Facebook group. It's a free group. So it's a place to make sure that you guys aren't missing out on any content. Also, a great place for you to mastermind and hang out with and be around other like-minded people. So anyway, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and let's jump on into the show. All right, what is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD interview where every single week we interview top entrepreneurs and just straight up top badasses that are out there dominating this space. So these are people that do not accept a life of mediocrity, but instead go out there and choose to create a life of greatness for themselves and for their families. So really stoked and honored you guys today. We have an entrepreneur on the show who is in the health and fitness space. Somebody has been, I guess, a lifelong athlete, if you will. And now she coaches a lot of entrepreneurs on how to go out there and take care of their health and helping their busy business schedules, if you will, that exist out there. So I'm really stoked and honored to have Jennifer Rulon on the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be on here.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I love, to me, I know, just speaking personally in my own businesses, there's no way that I could have the success that I've had in all of our business ventures if it wasn't for my health, my energy levels, and it's something I'm so passionate about. I like every day, like my number one goal is to hit my morning routine, which incorporates health and fitness and nutrition, right? I know if I hit that, dude, the rest of my day is epic. And we see this all the time. We see so many entrepreneurs that it's like the first thing to go. They let their health go, and then we see it where they let even their family go, and they have all these excuses of how business gets in the way, which we know it's an excuse. So really stoked
excuses.
Yeah. So I'm really stoked to have you on because this is your specialty. Like you not only are living it, but you also coach very highly successful entrepreneurs on how to make sure that you're making time for your health and your fitness. But before we get into a lot of that, which I got a lot of questions there, I'm really interested in your own personal journey. Like what led you into this space, into entrepreneurship, into coaching and consulting?
Yeah. So this is considered my second job, like my second career, right? But I've always had the love of triathlon and the love of the sport. And that was since 1989. It's the same story I tell every time. But I was watching the ABC Wide World of Sports, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. And it was Mark Allen, Dave Scott running, like, I think they were doing a crazy, insane, like under 6-minute miles together, doing this Ironman in Hawaii. And I thought, well, if that's pretty cool. And then like an hour later, I see the first female, Paula Newby-Fraser, cross that finish line. And I just got so passionate about triathlon because I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this event. Like somehow, somewhere, by the time I'm 30, I need to do an Ironman triathlon. And I did Ironman Wisconsin by the time I was 30 in 2002. But the thing was, it wasn't that Ironman. It wasn't Ironman Kona. So my quest has been Ironman Kona since 1989. And so what happened was that I was doing triathlons. I started coaching on the side business, right, in 2001. And then I realized my job that I was at previous to this, it wasn't enjoyable anymore. I wasn't finding that passion that I had before when I was working. And I thought, you know what? I want to go back to school when I was 40 and got my master's because I wanted to find what was actually happening in that human body. I mean, I can say, hey, go out and swim, bike, and run, but why? And how, the nutrition aspects of everything. So then after I realized, I was like, I got to do, I started coaching, like I said, in 2001, just on the side business, but then I needed to find out the whys behind what was happening. And then I left that full-time job and decided to start my own business as jenrulon.com. And it scares the beep out of me. I didn't know if I could swear, but yeah.
It's Get You Done podcast, so there's nothing that's off limits.
Okay. Yeah, it scared the crap out of me, because I thought, here I had this full-time job with benefits and everything, and I'm starting my own company. That's insane.
Yeah, no, I love that. So let's transition into that because a lot of our listeners right now, and they may not be in the health and fitness space or the real estate space and other spaces that you and I are involved in, but they're in corporate America and they're watching the podcast because, dude, they're going through what you went through. They have that internal war where they're just miserable. They know that entrepreneurship's for them, but they're freaked out. They don't know how to make the transition, and they're watching the podcast hopefully for inspiration in order to do that. So what were some of those initial things, because a lot of people talk about successes, but they don't talk about those initial like hardcore failures, objections, challenges. What were some of those initial challenges as an entrepreneur that you had to overcome and maybe that you didn't even expect would be a challenge that you had to face?
I think just the whole business side of things, because for me, coaching was easy. I could do that in my sleep and I can coach athletes to cross that finish line, no problem. But when it came to owning a business and running a business, that's when I needed to go find out how to do accounting, how to do marketing, how to do social media and things like that. And that to me was pretty tough, just because I was reading so much. But then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I have to still coach my athletes, So it's just that it was, and I hate the word balance, but it's just trying to figure out what was working for me at that time. So I think one, just the fear of leaving the norm, but you know what? You have one freaking life. And I came to realize that after I lost my dad and I had 4 miscarriages, life is too effing short to be sitting there behind a desk or whatever you're doing to like get shit done. You have to get it done. So I think that was a good, hey, get your butt in gear. Let's figure something out.
Yeah. So and I love that you brought that point because it's like the chef analogy. Like, oh, I'm a brilliant chef. I can cook amazing meals, but that doesn't mean I can go open up a restaurant and be successful.
Yes.
Like you have to have those different skills. So, but at the same time, I mean, you got a full plate. Like you're probably coaching 10, 12 hours a day, and then you got to master these other skill sets. Like, give us an idea of what your schedule is like and how you did it in the beginning.
Oh boy. The cool thing about triathletes is that I get to do a lot of their stuff online because a lot of triathletes, Ironman triathletes, entrepreneurs are go-getters. So, I mean, up 6 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out like, okay, what do I have to do? I have to do coaches workouts, or athletes workouts. I have to do my finances. I have to do my social media for the day. I have to do my own workouts. I have to do my own training. Like if I don't get that in, I am a grumposaurus. So it's trying to figure out, like, I should say that day looks so different, but it's just trying to stay ahead of the game in the entrepreneur world and in the business world, because everybody's coming up with new ideas and like content, blog writing. I love to write. I've been doing a lot of vlogs lately. That's been the new thing. But it's very time consuming, especially writing a blog. That's very time consuming. So sometimes I just have to look at my calendar and block out times like blog, website work. The last 3 days I've been cleaning up my website, and that's a lot of work too. And that can take away from my athletes as well.
Yeah, and it's not even the work of doing it; it's the work of learning it, right? Because you know how to go out there and train athletes and be an athlete and be successful at that, but you're having to learn, the marketing aspect and all this stuff too as well. So,
I could go hire somebody to do that, on whatever Upwork or Fiverr, but if I don't have any money coming in, then why am I spending it? Like figure it out. So
now I was on a speaking panel recently, and one of the guys up there said, like right out of the gate as an entrepreneur, go out there and start hiring your team, delegating. If you can make $50 an hour, delegate out what makes $15 an hour. Of course, he was the only guy on the panel that wasn't an entrepreneur. He was a W-2 employee. But I'm like, all that makes sense. But you got to be fiscally responsible. You have to have the money coming in the beginning. Yeah, you're wearing all hats, and in the entrepreneurial world, the fad word today is hustle. Right? But a lot of people are like, oh man, I'm grinding my 8 hours a day. I'm hustling. I don't even want to say in the beginning, because I know you're probably still putting in a lot of hours. We live, eat, and breathe this, but give our listeners an idea so that they kind of know what to truly expect of what it really takes as far as hours a day. Like what's a typical day from wake up to evening, or going to bed, whether when you're getting started or today, if it's any different?
I would say, wake up at 6 and my day is ending at 7. But here's the thing, in between, I'm doing my own workouts. I don't have a set schedule. And so sometimes the typical day is hard, but I really do try to shut down at 7. Honestly, it is really hard to do that because my husband is an Ironman triathlete. He qualified for Kona, so he's training at night. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, if he's sitting on the bike for 2 hours, then I could just get some more work done. And if I don't, so sometimes I really have to learn how to shut off so I can spend the quality time when he's not on the bike.
Yeah, how do you do that, right? Because, when we're drivers, that's the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing is to, fit this mold of society, if you will, right? Watching TV can become pain, and, how do you shut it off?
I have to tell my athletes specifically, hey guys, I'm shutting down at 7 o'clock tonight. I will not be taking any text messages, phone calls, emails, etc. And then that keeps me accountable to myself. If I tell my husband that same thing, I say, I'm going to shut down at 7 every night this week, then I tell him, keep me accountable. Because if you see me on the computer typing away, it's hard. I admit that. It's really hard.
Yeah, but I love that you brought up setting up boundaries, because so many of us think that, that our clients, we have to be available 24/7, but you don't.
No,
if you set those boundaries, they'll respect it and honor it, and I love that. So, okay, so now, you're to the point where you're coaching a lot of athletes, and a lot of your athletes are entrepreneurs. So, this big excuse out there is, I don't have the time, I'm working 14-hour days, and I'm busy with this. So let's go down that path. What do you do? Somebody that's maybe struggling with their health and wants to get into it. How do they eliminate that excuse? Where do they start? And how do you help your clients overcome that excuse?
A lot of those clients don't have that excuse, which is nice because a lot of them are go-getters. But I have talked to a lot of people who have said, well, I don't have time to do an Ironman. Well, you don't have to do an Ironman. Let's figure out, do you have time to do a sprint triathlon? And they're like, well, what does that consist of? And I'm like, 2 swims, 2 bikes, 2 runs a week, whatever's your weakest event, add 1. And then they're like, well, I don't have time for that. I'm like, well, where's your priorities? So I always have to ask people where their priorities are first and what is their why behind doing it. And we hear that all the time. But entrepreneurs are go-getters, and that's what I love about them. But they're really good about blocking their time and their health for themselves. A lot of, I should say, entrepreneurs that have built a business, they have seen when you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And then it's not just about the workouts, right? I mean, it's like I have found, and now by no means am I a triathlete. You know, I hit the gym for like an hour a day, so I can't put myself on that level.
That's good.
You know, but it's like all the other stuff, the meal prep, and you know, all of this stuff, which does become difficult, right?
Yes.
Because it's like, man, I don't have time to cook, and then you're all this stuff. Like, I mean, what are some things there? Because again, what I'm trying to really do is I want to make sure that we're eliminating anybody that's listening to this that has that excuse of, I don't have the time, I'm busy, because I hear it all the time, oh, I got to go to McDonald's, dude, because I'm on the road, I'm too damn busy, and we know it's just because they're not prepping and planning, but how do you walk through that part of it? Because that's like the most time-consuming part, I find, is the meal prep and the supplementation, all of that.
So I am not a nutritionist, so I will tell you that right now, but I am a creature of habit. So I know that I like my eggs, bacon, you know, fruit. So I know that's something I know I can make really quick and easy. When it comes to during lunch, I usually try to get out and actually try to go do something, but I go somewhere that's within, I do macros. So that's within my macro plan. So, you know, I'm in San Antonio, so there's a lot of Mexican food down here, but you could get fajitas with no tortillas and you know, vegetables and all that stuff. And then for dinner wise, you know, I try to not eat as much as I did throughout the day. So I've always heard, you know, eat breakfast like a king, eat lunch like a queen, eat dinner like a pauper. So it's like you eat the majority of your food in the morning, so then you have to prep it the night before, plain and simple. You know, if maybe the bacon and the eggs might not be as good, you know, stuck in the fridge, but if you know that that's what you're going to get and what you need, then that's, you know, you got to do it. Like I don't have time for excuses. I don't. So you have to figure out your priority and what's your priority. If your health is not your priority, the next time, you know, you go to the doctor may tell you, you need to make your health a priority. And sometimes people wait too late, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad. I mean, it's not even sometimes, it's most of the time. I mean, if we look
at
society today, I mean, there's that stat out there what like, God, I can't remember the stat, but like almost 80% of people are obese, are overweight, 40% are obese. But like when I'm walking around, I go like to the water park with my wife and my kids. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's like 90% are overweight, more like 60% are obese, and probably 60% of doctors are obese. You know, so it's something that they don't take, you know, into their own hands, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But what do you do to stay mentally strong? You know, right? Because, I mean, man, when you're pushing this hard and doing this stuff, you know, I mean, 90% of success is up here. Mm-hmm. So you personally, and even what you coach to your clients, like, how do you stay, like, dude, there's days when you wake up, you're depressed, you're not feeling it, but man, I got to go run, I got to go do all this, I got to create these websites. How do you keep yourself mentally strong and doing the work?
Doing the business side of things, you mean?
Just life,
man. Just everything.
Because it's all the same, right? When we break it down.
It is all the same. I surround myself with amazing people. The people that support me, guide me, like don't bring me down. They keep me up. If I am having one of those days, because trust me, I do, you know, maybe if I'm having like one of those blah days, I'll go for a run with some music, which I rarely, you know, I don't try to run a lot with music, but sometimes you just need some Eminem and Queen, man. You just gotta be jamming to Fat Bottom Girls, you know? So I think one, surround yourself with people who believe in you, who validate who you are as an athlete, as an entrepreneur, as a person. And then you also have to just sort of get into that head. And if you hear that negativity, just sort of flick them off the shoulder and then just try to move on. And sometimes if you do have those bad days, take an hour, embrace it, figure it out, get mad, do something, and then just say, okay, I'm done. I'm done with my little pity party. I'm going to move on. I got shit to do.
I love that, because so many people like have this message of, oh, never listen to your emotions and blah blah. But at the end of the day, we're human. Like, you know, like at some point we got to allow ourselves to feel them a little bit, and then. So I love that you saw that you say that. So okay, so I mean, as far as self-development, and I know you don't listen to typically music. I don't know if you listen to self-development when you're running, or books, or running. But what do you? I mean, how important is self-development to you, to your overall success, and what does that look like on a daily basis for you?
No, I love it. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to those podcasts that are just gonna, once again, promote, like, just bring positivity to my life versus, you know, and you don't hear a lot of negative podcasts, but just, you know, people that you want to be educated by. And so, yeah, no, I do listen to music. I'll even have some, you know, videos or music playing when I'm doing like the web page instead of just sitting there, or go to a coffee shop and do things there. So I'm surrounded by people instead of being all by myself. So I think the podcast, and I love reading. And then even just, I've been reading so much about sleep lately, and that's been the new thing, you know, about how important sleep is, which I highly agree. But I will not take my phone. I will not take an iPad to bed, and I will, you know, shut it down. I even tell my husband, I'm like, hey, we got to turn the television off, because, and the Olympics just hurt me on my sleep, by the way. Yeah, you know, I think once you have that sleep, that 8 hours, that mental clarity is so much better. It's crazy.
I love it. So I mean, you're saying so many amazing things, and every time you say, like, you say something, I've got 10 more notes here to ask and to follow up with. So I'll try to just kind of rapid fire these off. So you talked about the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people, and you talked about people that support you, which is we need that, right? We need that support system. But what about, you know, in entrepreneurship, they say that you are the 5 people, you're the result of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. But same thing with our health or fitness. I mean, every other aspect. Like, how do you go out there and choose those 5 people? And then what do you do if, like, you've got that person that I mean, you've known for a long time, you have a relationship with, but they're not really supporting you. They're not leveling up with you, and it kind of brings you down. Like, what?
So in that, my prior job, I was an animal trainer, and when we see something negative happen, we ignore the behavior and we continue on. And that's sort of what I do with people, is that if I just am getting that negativity around me, I just sort of ignore them. I don't maybe reach out to them as much. I don't, because eventually that will drop off. You know, I've actually had to fire athletes and fire people just because I'm like, if you're going to be on my team, I don't need that negativity. You know, I don't need somebody that's with excuses. So I have fired athletes. But when it comes to like friends and relationships and stuff like that, there are times where I just have to ignore the incorrect behavior and I move on. So.
No, I love it. So with your spouse, it sounds like your husband is also. You guys have a lot of things that are congruent together. What do you feel are like the importance of successes in life and business with making sure that you're congruent with your spouse and what you're doing?
I mean, communication's key. I mean, we know that, right? But I think what I love about my husband is that we understand each other when we're 6 weeks out from an Ironman. You're tired, you're grumpy, you're always hungry, you're sleeping. So I think just having something similar that you both like helps, because you can understand each other. I will have to say, we don't have any kids, so that can sometimes help a little bit. But I think the communication, and then just being a part of our everyday life. I can't, even though he might be having a crappy day at his job and I'm having a crappy day at my job, we just have to talk about it and not just shut down and not discuss, because then you don't really know what's going on in each other's lives, other than, and he's not on Facebook, so he can't see what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, no, I love it. So you talk about communication, right? So, and the reason I bring this up is I have so many of my personal coaching clients, and I don't coach athletes, but just a lot of entrepreneurs, and that becomes a difficult space of like, hey man, I'm out there grinding my 14, 15, 16 hours days, trying to build this. I'm having a very difficult time getting buy-in from my spouse. And that all boils down to communication. So whether you're, because running doing the triathlon, the Ironmans like you guys doing the triathlons, that's almost like a full-time job on its own. Plus your jobs, like how do you, when you talk about communication, how do you communicate to get the buy-in from each other? Because like there's times like you may not like agree, but you still have to support each other. So, and I know communication's key to it, but everybody says communication, but then how do you do it?
Shut the computer down. Do not be in front of a computer. Do not be in front of your phone. You go sit outside and you actually have a conversation. There's no distractions. Maybe the only distraction is the dog or a glass of wine or coffee or whatever. But I think, I know. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to talk to my husband about some of the issues that I'm dealing with, because he had a crappy day at work too, right? So, but I know that if I don't talk to him, it's going to blow up in however many weeks, when I should have talked to him back then about it. And I do get nervous, not nervous, but sometimes in my head, I think, well, I'm here busting my ass, but he's doing the exact same thing at his job. So he understands the busting of the butt, but we both do it, and we do it physically and work-wise too. So
yeah, I love it. I had a guest on not too long ago that says that, hey, in relationships you have a lot of small conversations, so you don't have to have the big conversations.
Yes.
Which
that's
sounds
genius.
In alignment with what you're talking about. So all right, so I'm curious about the sleep deal, because I'm like this guy that, like, if I could learn how to eliminate sleep and eating from my life, I would do it, right? Because I'd be able to get so much done, right? Like, to me, it's just like this hindrance.
I know.
So I'm always trying to hack my own sleep, and it worked very good for years. But now I'm 34, right? And I got 3 kids. It's catching up to me, dude. Like I've operated so many years off of 4 hours sleep, and again, eating a very specific organic diet, taking certain supplements, and getting my blood work done every 90 days, trying to hack it. But eventually, like, I'm feeling it now. Like, eventually, it catches up to you. So what do you? You've obviously done a lot of research, and you've done your own testing with sleep and what this looks like. So when you talked about the importance of sleep, what do you mean by that? And what have you discovered in your own world of the importance of that?
In the exercise physiology world, in health and fitness, rest is where you improve for your workouts the next day, the next week, the next month. Plain and simple. Rest, it's part of the program. So I require my athletes to take a full day off. And when I say full day off, I'm not saying going and mowing the lawn, going to Home Depot and building a shed. I am saying a complete day off. And then have the option of saying to yourself, okay, today's going to be sleep-in Saturday or sleep-in Sunday, and make sure you get 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And even if you have to nap that day, then do it, because that is only going to help you going into that next week. And I'm not saying trying to make up your sleep on the weekends, but trying to get to bed early. And I mean, gosh, sometimes we'll go to bed at 11, sometimes we'll be in bed at 10, and that's pretty decent for us, but we will sleep until 6 o'clock. And a pretty good solid sleep, keeping it cool, turning off all the electronics 30 minutes out. But the body, for an athlete to improve their performance, rest is the key.
So have you found anything in your own personal testing that you've done as far as like supplement wise, like omega 3s or like I wear these goofy blue light eliminating glasses all day long when I'm on I don't wear them on the podcast, but all day long on the computers and watch. Like I feel like it helps me get into REM sleep quicker. And do you have any like little hacks that you've learned to not necessarily because we know a lot of people that get 8 hours sleep, but they're really not getting 8 hours sleep because they suffer from insomnia, really being able to get into the quiet REM sleep that they need.
The one thing that I will do is it's called HRV, heart rate variability. And it's every morning I wake up, I do my normal routine, brush the teeth, make the bed, and then I go sit down and I take my heart rate for under like 55 seconds or whatever. And so that will see how I'm doing that day. Even though I may feel exhausted or sore from the workout before, according to my HRV, which I've had a baseline of that for quite some time, will tell me if I need to maybe not do interval work, if I need to, okay, you're fine, you're just sleepy, just get a cup of coffee in you or something like that. So that HRV, like checking your heart rate every morning, has helped me a lot because it shows me, okay, I didn't get enough sleep, my body's sore, but my HRV is green. I should be able to perform the way I'm supposed to today.
Yeah, love it. So being a, an extreme athlete, because you're not just like an athlete.
Right.
Like I'm talking like you're doing extreme stuff, and I don't even know if if our guests or our listeners haven't aren't familiar with Ironmans, like you have to go Google them. Every time I see somebody with an Ironman tattoo, I'm like, that's a straight up badass. Like that's insane to go through. Like most of my buddies that have ever trained from, and guys are in amazing shape, and they get injured before they even get there. Right? So just to be able to get there is insane, and complete them is a whole nother world. So when you're training at that level, and obviously doing all the things they do in life, like have you found any type of a difference as far as when it comes to nutrition, right? Because we see so many chemicals that exist. I heard a stat the other day that there's 10,000 chemicals on the grocery store shelves, right? That like we're not supposed to be able to ingest. So, as far as like organic eating and eating clean, and like what type of a personal difference do you see in that?
Me personally, like I told you, is I do my macros. So, and I noticed that when I don't eat enough as an athlete, I start craving the sugars. So like, jelly beans, chocolate, like little things like that. So then I realize that if I'm not eating enough food, then I need to start upping my calorie intake. When it comes to like the clean eating, for me as an athlete, I just need to eat. Like there are days where I'm not going to go to McDonald's, but yes, I'm going to go to Chipotle and get, a rice bowl with, a whole bunch of meat and some avocado. Yes, I'm going to do that because I need to actually eat the food versus worrying about maybe what's in that food right now because I need to get ready for tomorrow's workout. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. So when you're talking about macros, just so our audience can kind of grasp that, because you're breaking down, okay, how much protein, how many carbohydrates, how many fat, different things of that. So when you're talking about that, because you're like, well, I gotta ingest food, but you're still paying attention to that. So what kind of breakdowns do you look for with that?
Yeah, I look at protein. I look, I'm looking at like, for me, I probably need to up my ante actually. But, I'm looking at carbohydrates, I'm looking at protein, I'm looking at fat. So every time I sit down and eat, I'm like, okay, what am I looking at? I'm not going to go to McDonald's and get a bun and a burger and something like that. I'm going to make sure that food is what I need. It's hard to explain it because, like, as a triathlete, a lot of triathletes and a lot of Ironman athletes undereat. They undereat. And so I will use macros, the carbohydrates, the fat, the protein. I think I look at grams and I weigh everything out. It's a pain in the ass. I will tell you that right now. But it keeps me accountable. Instead of sitting there snacking on, jelly beans, I'll take a handful of berries, walnuts, and some Greek yogurt and mix that all up. I think it keeps me accountable of eating real food and not versus one, not eating at all, or two, eating crap.
So just out of personal curiosity, when like an average day of training for an Ironman, I mean, how many calories you burn in a day? Like, what does that look like?
Oh gosh, probably over, me personally, probably if I'm on like the bike, probably over 3,000, just the bike alone. So then if I do 6-hour bike and then I go for a 20-minute run, that's another 3,500 calories. So then what happens is that we're just to live, just to survive, I probably need 1,200 calories, so that's almost 5,700 calories for the day. And then I sit there and I gorge and I eat and I eat and I eat and I'm like, oh, I'm still hungry. It's crazy. But I'm not going to go to, I'm going to sit there and try to eat the meats and the fats and the carbohydrates. And there's days where I'm like, nope, I am going to go get some fries and a burger. There's just times where I'm like, you know what, I got to eat. So
yeah. Now, but I mean, you can get away with it, right? Because I mean, you're out there burning 5,000-6,000 calories a day. It's different than the average human. So your average, like 180-pound male, he's maybe burning 1,800 calories a day max if they're not working out, right? And your average, let's say 130-pound female is 1,300. So big difference there when it comes to that, because you've got to replenish that. So that's insane. Yeah. Do you ever feel, and these are just personal, like I'm just curious, like when you're eating that many calories, like, I mean, because you say you're still hungry, but do you ever feel like you're force feeding, having to force feed yourself?
Yes.
And like, is that why so many athletes that compete at the level you do, you feel like undereat? Because man, you're just like you're having to force feed yourself.
Yeah. There's times where with my macro, I have a hard time with protein. So get that supplement out. And so there's times at night, it's like 10:30 at night, and I look at my macros, I'm like, oh my God, I'm still short. So I will sit there and lug a shake down with some type of protein and some berries or something and water just to get the protein in me. And then I go to bed full, but I know that's going to help me that next day for that workout.
Yep. Yeah, I remember when I was competing in bodybuilding, when I diet for a show, I was never hungry. I just felt like I was forced, even though it was chicken and broccoli and water, but it was still like, you're like, holy crap, like you're like choking it down, not because it tastes bad, because you're so bloated. And it's the opposite of what you would ever think. One thing I'm curious about with your take on is water consumption. And I don't know where these like quote unquote gurus came up with these sayings like 8 glasses of water a day. Like I'm like, who the hell? Like, I know for me, I don't feel good if I don't drink an ounce per pound. But I mean, I live in Phoenix where I sweat a lot and things like that. But how important do you find that being hydrated is? Not, I mean, to every aspect of, because obviously you got your training aspect, but also just your mental performance as an entrepreneur and everything else.
I mean, we know water's important, right? So it's, I think it's funny because as entrepreneurs, we're always like, hey, let's go for coffee. And all the time we're chugging down coffee, and then we get hungry or we get hangry. And then we get to a point where, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the first fast food restaurant that you're going to go because you haven't been, you've been chugging down coffee. You haven't been drinking any water. And sometimes with me, I have to force myself to drink water, especially when I'm sitting there working on my website or whatever. And so, because it's a lot easier to grab a coffee, but then it keeps me a little full. Yeah, I mean, even in the triathlon world and the Ironman world, when I'm out there riding, especially in San Antonio, like it gets hot here. I mean, just like and we're constantly chugging water. I'm not really good about the scientific aspects of water and how much you need to drink, but yeah, I agree with you on the body weight.
Yeah, I mean,
amount.
I think if we just be cognizant of how we feel, and this is something people don't do, but it's like, okay, hey, if I eat this food, like, just ask yourself, just keep a journal. Like, how does this make me feel? Does it make me feel sluggish? Do I have energy? Do I feel better? Do I have brain fog? And most people, they just live this crazy busy life that they don't even slow down enough to analyze, which is kind of scary. So something I'm pretty passionate about is overcoming obesity. I when I grew up, I told you before off air, my father owned health clubs, and I grew up in that space. But when I dropped out of college, I allowed myself to adopt a victimhood mindset. I became very depressed. And I'm just slamming down, double whoppers and massive amounts of alcohol. Next thing I know, I'm 280 pounds. And became extremely obese, had to lose 118 pounds. And so I know what it's like to get there and be there and have to go through the struggles. One thing that scares the hell out of me is the rise of childhood obesity. I mean, we are literally seeing fifth graders with atherosclerosis and like heart disease, and it freaks me out, right? So, when I know your clients are already athletes, but we all have those friends or family members that we really care about that aren't taking care of their health.
Yeah.
So if we have someone listening to this podcast right now, that maybe is 40, 50 pounds overweight, and then what's scary too is their kids are going to do what they do. Like what are maybe some suggestions that you have to, because they're listening to you and like, dude, like I can't go do an Ironman. Like it just seemed like you're like Superwoman. They're like, screw it, I can't do it. Like where do they even start as far as a movement, as far as working out, and as far as nutrition? Like when they're at the low of the low, where do they even begin?
Yeah, I did something for that in San Antonio. It was a company that I worked with, and same thing. It was like they didn't know anything about nutrition and that aspects of things. So I'm like, the first thing, if you can afford it, get a pedometer. That's the cheapest thing. If you can't, if you can afford a Fitbit, you grab a Fitbit or whatever that's going to count your steps. Your phone counts your steps. And so what I suggest, 10,000 steps a day is 5 miles approximately. But if you cannot do 10,000 steps that day, then do 1,000 one day, do 2,000 the next day, bring it back down to 1,000. Like just try to get active again. And all it has to be is a simple walking and try to knock out some steps. So that would be my first thing. Second thing would be to start educating yourself about nutrition. Because if these parents are obese, like you said, then it's going to just stem down to the children. So those parents need to educate themselves about nutrition, instead of, and it's interesting here in San Antonio, beans are great. Flour tortillas are awesome. Oh, love them. But that's not what you need right now. You need meats, fajitas or whatever. You need avocados, you need protein and fats, and your carbohydrates are going to be vegetables. And so once we start, it's all about getting the parents educated, then those kids will see those parents making a difference. One thing that I came up with in San Antonio was that somehow I came up with some crazy numbers, and it was not scientifically data at all. But San Antonio was considered one of the biggest top 10 obese cities in the United States. And I figured out that if one trainer in San Antonio would be able to touch 120 people's lives in 1 year, that obesity rate would be off that list. And I think if the trainers are out there, like if an entrepreneur can afford a personal trainer, then go for it, and if not, get your Fitbit. There's your personal trainer, and surround yourself with people that are going to encourage you to do that. Going back to the whole entrepreneur world, and keeping yourself accountable. Last thing would be your why of why you want to be fit. And that's a really big topic of discussion, is the whole why thing. But I talked to my mom about this. I'm like, what's your why of living? You're going to almost be 70 years old. What's your why? She's like, my grandkids. And I go, bam, that's it. So you need to get fit, for those grandkids, so you'll be around to see her graduate high school.
Yeah. So when you work with your clients on the why, because I couldn't agree more. Like, it's because there's so many days where we lose motivation, we're burnt out. Like, so many people are like, oh, I don't have the willpower this long. None of us do. Like, right?
Right.
It's like Darren Hardy. I love that he's like, I don't believe in willpower, I believe in why power. But a lot of people have difficult time because when it comes to really getting deep in that why, and I know with a lot of your clients, you're starting there, but like, what are some of the exercises that you walk them through? Because maybe we have like a 28-year-old that's on this podcast right now. I was like, dude, I don't have kids, I don't have grandkids, I'm not married. Like, what the hell would my why be? Like how do you go deep and discover what that why is? Sooner than later, too, right? Because the sooner, the better.
Gosh, that's a good question. I always, like, what's your legacy? What do you want to leave behind in your world? So if you are a 28-year-old, no kids, no family, like, what's your legacy? When you leave this earth, what do you want to be on your tombstone, and what do you want to be remembered as? That's impactful. Like, it's like, oh, I was a whatever, yeah. And it's cool. To me, your legacy, your dad, your husband, that's super impactful.
Yeah.
And that's your why.
Yep, love it. So, again, out of personal curiosity, you talked about, okay, you did the Wisconsin Ironman, but it wasn't the Kona. I didn't know that there was like and this is being uneducated on this, but I didn't know like okay. There was what's the difference of the different Ironmans? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yep. So Ironman Kona is the world championship. So every October, all the cream of the crop come to Kona, and they compete to see who's the best. So you have to qualify to get to Kona. So I have done 10 Ironmans. Once again, cray, right? But I'm still trying to get to that goal, and that goal is Kona. I pretty much have to be I have to podium. I have to be in the top 5 of my age group. And I just aged up. I'm in the 45 to 49 age group, and these girls are fast. I'm fast, but these girls are fast. So I'm getting there. I'm trucking along, and I'm seeing improvements. It's crazy because it's like, oh, I'm at my prime. I'm good, but man, I think as a woman, getting to my prime is I'm just getting there. So
yeah. So and again, man, you keep saying so many things that keep spurring so many more questions, because I hear it all the time for, like, whether it's friends, family members, or clients, or whatever it may be, of man, I'm 40, I'm beyond my prime. They think that they're in their 20s and 30s at their prime, but we know, those of us who are in the fitness industry, like, we know you don't come close to getting there. Like, in your 40s, you are truly in your prime, and even in your 50s, right? So, like, what do you say to dispel? 'Cause, like, here's a prime example. I'm working out with a dude the other day, who's a good friend of mine. He's 53 years old, and he's like, well, I think I'm in his, he's got a gut and all. He's like, I think I'm pretty good shape for 53 years old. And I'm like, okay, maybe you're in good shape for like when you go to the beach and your comparison to everybody else. But, do you truly feel like you're in the best shape that you possibly can be? Is this where you want to be? And it came down to, no, he wasn't, with that. But, he had this comparison to the rest of society, but he really wasn't going deep onto him. I'm like, dude, I know you're capable of more. Like, what do you say to people that have those limiting beliefs, because it exists so much?
I tell them, I'm like, that's an excuse. It's crazy. Like, I think I think my first 5K was like 27, 28 minutes. That's over almost 10-minute miles. Now I'm knocking out 650s. I did that last Saturday. It was a 4K, but I was knocking out 650 per mile. I'm 25 years older than I was when I did my first 5K. Like, so you cannot tell me that, age is a factor. It really isn't. And the cool thing, what I love about triathlon, is just that you see a range of ages. Like at a race we saw like 13, 14-year-old kids, and then we saw an 83-year-old man. And he finished. And he was what, 20 minutes past the 13, 14-year-olds, but he was doing it. So it's pretty cool.
Yep. Those that don't know what an Ironman entails, what does it break down to being?
Yeah, it's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2 marathon run.
Yeah. So people are like, oh, a marathon's insane. It's like you finish the marathon, you're just starting.
Seriously. And I tell people tell me I'm crazy when I tell them this, but I think an Ironman is much easier than doing a full marathon. Even though a marathon is within that Ironman, because the swim, I got to warm up, full body warm up, right? The bike, I got the bike to help me out. And then the run, it's like you said, it's game time. It's time to get going for the run. So, yeah.
What's like the most difficult part for most people? Like I've heard it's the swim. Because one, it's like everybody's competitive, so you're getting kicked in the face and hit. But people you don't expect to. You just expect to be able to last, not to get an elbow to the head. What is the most difficult part that you found personally?
I think personally, as I've gotten older, nutrition. Because for an Ironman, for a half Ironman, when you're out there between 5 hours to 12 hours, trying to figure out what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, that's got to be one of the hardest things. But I think I figured it out, so knock on wood. But it's crazy. I have a bottle full of liquid sauce, and it's called First Endurance EFS Pro. It's 250 calories per bottle per hour on the bike. So if I'm on the bike for 6 hours, I drink 6 bottles of 250 calories. And then the run is different, because then you get to the run and sometimes you're like, I don't want anything, and so you just got to start chugging the water. So it's a totally different beast. I think for people for their first Ironman, first triathlon, I do think the swim is very tough for a lot of people. Agreed.
Yeah,
because they're scared.
Yeah, no, I'm scared, and I'm not even training for one.
Because if you stop, what's going to happen?
Yeah, that's it. So just because I want to make sure that we have this out there, because some of our listeners are extreme athletes, and I know I talk to people all the time that want to go out there and train for an Ironman. It's on their bucket list. The cool thing about entrepreneurs is we know the power of coaching, right? And the power of getting the right information. So if somebody does want to reach out to you, learn more about it, because you don't just coach in that space, you also are a CrossFit coach. And let's talk about some of the areas that you coach in, that you consult in, and that you do. And then where's the best place to go learn more about you if anybody wants to reach out to you and consult with you?
Sure. So I do a lot of one-on-one customized triathlon training programs that are designed for your life. So if you have, limitations, like you don't have a pool that week, guess what? We'll figure it out. It won't be a pool week or whatever. So I do a lot of customized. I do a lot of strength training for triathletes, because I had an 8-year sabbatical between my Ironmans, and I found CrossFit, drank the Kool-Aid, but I loved what strength has done for me as an athlete. And I try to encourage moms, dads, everybody to start strength training. But when you sign up with me for customized training, your strength plan is already included. Sometimes I've done individual sessions for strength training. And then I also do coaching the coach. I have a lot of coaches come out to me and say, hey, how'd you start your business? And it's like, well, a lot of hard work and dedication and hustle. But no, I sort of, I don't want to say a mentorship, because I think, I think if you can get involved with somebody that's been there, done it, and still doing it, I think having that is really helpful too, and being in that health and fitness space. It's hard, especially with a specific niche. So you could go to jenrulon.com. You could follow me on Instagram, Pinterest, Pinterest, but Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all the same, Coach Jen Rulon, Rulon. And then Facebook, I have Jen Rulon Triathlon Facebook page as well. But jenrulon.com is the best place to get a hold of me, especially since I'm updating my website.
Yep, love it. And those of you watching or listening, the links will be right below. Make it easy, and you just go click the links and check all that out. So another question I have for you, and again, this is out of my own personal curiosity, is staying healthy as far as not nutrition health, but like joint health, injury prevention. Because I was at one point, this was like 2 years ago, I was doing CrossFit, and I was training for a marathon. And I like popping my Achilles tendon, getting some micro tears. I didn't have to have surgery. It was all things. It wasn't training for the marathon. It was double unders and CrossFit, but it was just too much. I think I'm doing, I was running 4 days a week, CrossFit 3 days a week, and pop that. Like, how do you stay healthy? Because I mean, that stuff just, it happens. I mean, I think one of the biggest things for athletes is staying healthy. I mean, it's so difficult. So like, what are some of the things that you do to look out for, to maybe, hey, if I feel something, like, to stop before you keep, whatever that may be, like, what do you do to stay healthy?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I'm dealing with some SI joint issues right now. And I think what it is from sitting so much and working on my dang website. That's why I'm standing right now. But I know that's there. So I'm like ice, mobility. I go to K-Star. I don't know if you see Kelly Starrett. He does mobility WOD stuff, and there's so much information on YouTube. Get on the lacrosse ball, foam roll, couch stretch. Couch stretch hurts so much, but there's just so much information out there. So I try to do at least 10, 15 minutes a day of mobility work. Does it always work out? No. But if I am sitting in my chair working on my website, I either have a lacrosse ball in my SI joint, I either have ice on there, maybe I have lacrosse ball in my shoulders and I'm moving it around, that type of thing. Or, I'm working on PF, and I don't have plantar fasciitis, but if I do, I get the ball on there, using that. So it's constantly maintaining and knowing when to let the ego go. Because if I'm in the gym and I'm, doing power cleans or snatches, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, my SI joints bother me. Oh, let's put some more weight on it. No, dumbass. Like, you have to tell yourself, no, that's not your priority right now. The SI joints, you got to move, but you don't need to load the bar. So but no, I understand. Like, I think it's been about 2 years. I rolled my ankle on the trails and I tore 2 ligaments in my ankle. It was just, and honestly, like, that day I was uber tired. My HRV was in red. But I thought, I'm tired. I just need to do a slow run. I'll go to the trails. Well, what happens when you run and you shuffle? So stepped on
not listening to the gut instinct when you're all pushed through it. And it's I don't know if you remember Larry Scott, but he was one of the original Mr. Olympians as far as like with Arnold and I met him when I was younger, and I was able to interview him and spend some time with him, and because he's known for obviously an amazing physique and being Mr. Olympia, but he also never had like any major injuries through his professional bodybuilder career. But he said he's like, dude, if anytime I ever felt any type of a tweak, right? He goes, there's 100 other exercises that I can move to that cause no pain, and he's like, that's where people screw themselves up, is pushing through that pain, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the ego. So,
I saw that, and when I coached CrossFit too, I saw the egos happening. I'm like, you don't have a full squat without the bar, so why are you loading your body with weight when you don't even have a decent squat from the beginning? Go back to air squats. Oh, no. And I'm like, okay.
That was my problem with CrossFit too. I was so competitive. Like, I just wanted to win. I was like, I'll screw up. I can sacrifice form. Right?
That's right. True.
Do you have any non-negotiable or must-have supplements that you believe that you take and that you recommend your athletes? So, I mean, whether it be like a probiotic or magnesium, or that you're like, dude, like, this is, anybody that's listening, that if you're training, in my experience, you should be taking this.
I will be the first to admit I am terrible with supplements. I am so bad at them, but branched chain amino acids. Those are usually, I've tried liquid branched chains. Sometimes that's a little hard to stomach before like a run, but I can usually do it before a bike. But if I know I come back from an easy, or like an interval run, then I'll pop some branched chain amino acids. Like I said, I'm not the best at supplements. That is one thing I do need to educate myself better on, along with everything else. Right.
Yeah. It seems like you're doing a pretty damn good job, and I agree with those branched chain. And people that don't know what those are, I mean, that's what repairs your muscle tissue, especially if you're a high producing athlete or an athlete. Dude, it's a must have. So I love it. So back to you personally, what keeps you, because so often we find that good is very easily the worst enemy to greatness, right? So like, what keeps you pushing and leveling up and not accepting greatness? Because you could be like, hey man, I've done it. Let me just go out there and coach and do this stuff and whatever, like things are good enough. And let me just, like, what keeps you leveling up and not accepting good enough and going after greatness?
Oh, that's a great question. I've always been driven, and I shouldn't say always, but I have achieved a lot of my goals that I've pushed for and that I have set for myself. Why am I that way? I don't know. My mom did an amazing job of teaching us about hard work, and so I still have that ingrained in my head. But I don't want to be mediocre. I don't. Like, and I get emotional because that's like, I have one life, and let's go be freaking great. And let's surround ourselves with great people. And life is, like I said, after my miscarriages and after losing my dad, I mean, I was always very positive and stuff like that. But after those big things happened in my life, like, it taught me, like, you know what, shit happens sometimes. And honestly, like, that was one of the toughest times of my life, but it also taught me that, okay, this happened. It happened for a reason. Now it's time to move on and be great about it. And I think I don't want to lose that sight. I hated the state I was in. I was depressed. I was sad. I felt like a failure especially after the miscarriages. I felt like a failure. I mean, my dad was my dad. Like, I couldn't do anything about that. But so, and I realized that that's something that I cannot control. That's something way bigger than I see beyond. So let's go be great now, and let's figure it out. Let's be even better than you were 5 years ago. And it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
So
I love it. So just a few last questions for you, because I know we're getting long on time, and you got a lot to go out there and do. And I want to respect your time. So as far as goals, right? Because so often we see that most people in society, they're setting goals. They're other people's goals, because they grew up or were conditioned by society to kind of live our life for our parents or society. Or I think Dave Ramsey kind of says it best. Like, he's like, oh, we spend all this money that we don't have to impress people that we really don't like and don't like us. Like how do you know?
Love that guy.
Yeah. So how do you know if your goals are yours or I'm speaking to another dude the other day. Again, you know, I'm in real estate, right? So a lot of my closest friends are in their, you know, their 50s, and you know, but that's just the industry, right? But I was talking to this gentleman the other day, and good friend of mine, and he goes, you know, until recently, and like literally until he was like 52 years old, he's like, his father passed away when he was younger as well, and he was like, my whole entire life, subconsciously, not really knowing it, but all my goals were to have impressed him if he was alive. He goes, I never really asked myself, how do I live that life for me and make my goals? Like, how do we break those down and differentiate it? Because so many people struggle with it, man. They're just living their lives for everybody else. Or like, oh, I'm not going to go do this because I don't want to be criticized by my parents. Or like, how do you differentiate that?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about your friend with the dad, because I did a TEDx talk, TED Talk, and that's exactly what I talked about. Because I was trying to get that approval of my dad in the sports world, because my brother and my dad had that amazing bond, and it's crazy. You guys have a crazy bond when it comes to football, basketball, baseball. Like, and I was like over here, like, hey, Dad, check me out. You know, hey, don't forget about me. And then when I realized that, you know, I found Ironman, I learned, even though I was trying to get my dad's validation with doing some type of sport, I realized that I didn't need it anymore after I crossed that finish line, because I found it within myself. I found that athlete that I always wanted him to see, or that champion that I always wanted him to see within me. But then I realized I didn't need it anymore, because I needed to do that myself. So I totally get where he's coming from. Yeah. I think once you figure out what drives you and what is, you know, whether it's dad or a mom or a parent or a grandparent, I think once you figure that out, then you'll see your goals are going to shift. Because like, if, you know, oh, my dad wanted me to be a doctor or whatever. Oh, they're a doctor. And all of a sudden he's like, well, I don't want to be a doctor anymore, you know, and then going to dad and saying, Dad, I'm quitting my job, or whatever it might be, you know. I mean, that's a little extreme, but I think once you, that's a tough question, but like, I think once you figure out the dream for yourself, and maybe you don't realize it was, you know, maybe, I don't know. God, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, do you have
Oh man,
like when you're doing that for yourself? I mean, do you find anything to be helpful as far as like meditation, or as far as like, hey, once a quarter, like I just get out of town and lock myself into a room, you know, to get away from the noise, to reflect on that? Because I think that's part of the problem too. Is we live in such a noisy world, noisy society, that we don't ever spend time in solitude to really be with our own thoughts.
Yeah. My solitude is a beach, plain and simple. So usually I will take, especially those moments where I maybe need to just step away from the world, is I will go to the beach and just sit with my thoughts, and, you know, maybe talk to the babies that I lost, or talk to my dad, you know, and just sort of be. And I think, you know, the beach might not be for everybody. Maybe it's going for a hike or going for a walk, but just not taking the phone, not having clutter up here. And that to me is, I try to do it quarterly. Yep. But I also every quarter, I also relook at my goals too. Every 90 days, I look at my business goals, I look at my personal goals, and I look at the family goals too. You know, I'd be like, okay, honey, what's our goals? And he's like, oh, here we go again. Because I am a goal setter. So yeah, those 90 days, segments of it, 90 days, but then stepping away from the world. And even, you know, I love getting in a car and just driving, you know, whether it's up to Austin or whatever, you know, that's a 90-minute drive, but just sit with a podcast and or don't have anything on at all. It's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's funny how we find those little quirks, because it's like, okay, because you can't get on your laptop. Like I used to love flying until they had the Wi-Fi option now that I kind of screwed that up, but it used to force me to be with my journal, and so I love that. So, I started this podcast, like most people have podcasts, but I started this podcast because there's so many coaches and quote unquote gurus that exist. And I've just found over my life of entrepreneurship that so much of it's smoke and mirrors. It's just so much fluff and BS and smoke and mirrors. And literally, I just bitched about it for 10 years. And then I was like, one day, I'm like, dude, I'm not the guy that normally bitches about things. I just take action. So I'm like, let me quit bitching about it. Let me do something about it. So I started this podcast because I wanted to go out there and interview doers like yourself. Right? Instead of these self-proclaimed gurus, find people like yourself that are out there creating epic lives, and not just in business, but every aspect of our life. Because you can have a successful business, but if your health sucks, you're divorced, and that's not success, right? So, so I wanted to go out there and interview doers like yourself. One, selfishly, so I can learn from you, which is always amazing, and I love that.
That's
but
great.
two, to give back to our listeners where they can learn from you. So with that being said, those that are watching and listening are here because they want to go out there and create an amazing life like you've been able to create for yourself. So with that being said, do you have any last words of inspiration, advice, motivation for them so they can go out there and create that life they know they want and that they truly deserve?
Yeah. Find your why. If you need to know how to figure that out, go to TED Talk, Simon Sinek. Phenomenal TED Talk. That would be my first tip. Number 2 tip would be set a goal. Give yourself 90 days. Give yourself a 5-year goal, but within that goal, sort of make little goals. So I was actually just talking to my athletes about this. BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. Sometimes we see that BHAG goal, but we forget about the little goals in between. So you really have to break down that. Because even if you need to start, the health-wise, okay, I can't walk 10,000 steps. That's my goal within a month, but you have to start walking. That's your first goal. And then my favorite quote from Henry Ford, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Like, if you sit there and tell yourself, well, I can't walk 1,000 steps, all right, sit on the couch, eat some bonbons, and watch America's Got Talent. That's not my issue. Like, my girlfriend comes up with this thing, not my circus, or not my monkey, not my circus. Like, figure your shit out. If you have to go to therapy, if you have to go talk to somebody about why you got these stuff up in your head, then it's okay. Be vulnerable, put the ego aside. Because you have, in my eyes, I have one life and I'm going to be great. Another quote I heard from another podcast, Lewis Howes, I don't remember who said it, but says, don't let perfection get in the way of good. So when I was sitting there doing my website, I was like, it's off like in half an inch. And I'm like, let it go. It's going to be fine for now. You can hire somebody to fix that later on, so.
Yep. Love it. Powerful words. To our listeners, I know I end every podcast with this, you guys, but information without implementation is truly just the start of delusion. Information is not power. It's taking that information, applying it, implementing in your life that creates power in the world. So Jennifer drops so many just amazing gold nuggets of information for you guys.
Thank you.
We talk so much about so many different things in this podcast. So take something that Jennifer shared with you, implement right now. Don't wait. Implement right now into your life, into your business, and into your health, and go out there and create the life that you know you want and deserve. And Jennifer, I know how busy you are, and this has been such an honor. This has been I've really enjoyed this, and I know I probably asked you some off the wall questions, but you're an awesome, just amazing, fascinating person, and I just had to take advantage of having that time together. So really appreciate it. Loved you being here, and to those of you watching, listen, thank you guys again. Keep up the amazing work. Keep kicking ass, and we will see you next time.